Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be going over how to do drag and drop in Jetpack Compose, and we'll be taking this all the way from a really basic example to something that is really advanced. So if you're ready to get started, then stay tuned. Let's learn together. Alright, so here we are in a brand new Jetpack Compose project. So let's go ahead and let's start building out the basics of our first drag and drop interaction. So let's go ahead and let's open our preview window here. And while that is building, let's go ahead and let's modify our greeting composable slightly here. Let's put our greeting in a column. Cool. And then we will, inside of our column, we will say that our column has a modifier. And this modifier will be a modifier dot fill max size. Cool. And then let's say that we want to go ahead and center this both horizontally and vertically. So we will do our horizontal alignment, and that will be our alignment dot center. And then we will do our vertical arrangement, and that will be again center. And now that we've got that, let's take our text and let's move it into this column here. And then let's slide my face out of the way here for just a second. And let's fix our preview. There we go. And then the next thing that we want to do is let's make this text draggable. So in order to make something draggable, it is pretty simple in Jetpack Compose. We just add a modifier to this text here. And then we can also, this modifier is called a drag and drop source. So let's scroll down and choose our drag and drop source here. And we want the one that takes a block. So let's choose this one. All right, cool. So let's open our curly braces here, and we'll give it our block. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to detect a tap gesture. So we will say that we want to detect a tap gesture, and we want this initializer here. And so we will say on long press, and then on our long press, we want to start a transfer. And as you can see here, this takes a drag and drop transfer data. Now this is very similar to what we did in a recent video with SwiftUI. So let's go ahead and let's say that we're going to take our drag and drop transfer data here. And when we create our drag and drop transfer data, we are going to pass in this clip data here. So our clip data, a new, and it won't be a new URI, but as you can see, we could do a URI, an intent, an HTML, or plain text. So for our example, we're just going to stick with plain text, and it takes a label. So we will just pass in a label here for now, and it takes a text. And our text, let's say that we want to do an emoji, and let's choose the dragon emoji since we are working on drag and drop. And now, as you can see, Android Studio is letting us know that this is an experimental API, so we need to add our opt-in for our experimental API there. Nice. Cool. All right. And so now we have added the ability to make this a source for data that we want to drag somewhere, but a source without somewhere to actually place that source doesn't really do us much good. So let's go ahead and let's give us somewhere to drop this data. So under our text component here, let's add a new box, and we will go ahead and, you know what, let's go ahead and pass in a couple modifiers in our box too here. And let's say that we have a modifier, and our modifier, whoops, equals a modifier, and let's say that we want the size of our box to be, let's say 100 dp. Cool. And let's say that we want background color of our box to be a color, oops, a color dot, and let's say green. Nice. Okay. And let's give ourselves just a little bit more padding between our box and our text. So on our text modifier up here, we will add a padding, and let's give it a padding on the bottom of 50 dp, for example. Cool, just to space those out a little bit more. All right. So the next thing that we want to go ahead and do, now that we've got our view laid out about like we want it, let's go ahead and make our box be able to receive the drag and drop content. So let's do that by saying that this is a drag and drop target. And inside our drag and drop target, we want to say that we have a should start drag and drop. And in our should start drag and drop, we want to say that it takes an event. And inside our event, we want to make sure that our event dot mime types dot contains, and we want to make sure that it contains, a clip description, and that description is going to be a mime type of text plain, just like that. And then the next parameter that we need to pass is our target. So let's go ahead and set up our target. So our target will be equals, and we'll use our remember here, and our remember will be an object, and that object is going to be a drag and drop target, that one right there. Cool. And then inside of our drag and drop target, we are going to override our on drop event. Nice. And so what we want to do here is we want to get our dragged data, and in order to do that, we take our event and we want to convert that to an Android drag event, and then we want to get the clip data from that, and then we will get the first item at our index 0 here, and then we will get the text parameter from that first item. Now we want to get the text from this parameter here because, as we can see, our clip data has two different properties in it, and the first property is label and the second one is a text, and we want the text out of that particular property. Cool. So now that we've got that in our method down here, let's go ahead and let's just print that out. So let's say that we dropped, and then we'll say the dragged data on the box. Cool. And then we will return true to let the system know that we dealt with our on drop event. All right. And with that, we are ready to go ahead and test out our app. So let's go ahead and let's run our app in the simulator. All right, now in order to just help clean up some of the data that Logcat prints out, let's only focus on our print lines. So in order to do that, we can filter by system.out here in our filtering area. So now let's click and hold on our text, and as you can see, we've got Hello Android. And if we drop it on our box, nice, you can see in our Logcat window here that we dropped the dragon on the box. Very cool. And with just that little bit of code, we've already been able to implement a very basic version of drag and drop in Jetpack Compose. Now let's go ahead and dive all the way to the bottom of the deep end of the pool, and let's do a lot more advanced use case. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and let's get Logcat out of the way, and we'll get our simulator out of the way, and let's come back over to our project and let's create a new file. We will make a Kotlin class, and let's say that this is our advanced drag and drop example. All right, cool. Let's actually not make that a class. Let's make this a function, and we will say that this function is a composable, and let's pass in our modifier here. Nice. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and put everything in the same file, even though usually in a normal project, these are things that you would want to break out into multiple files. We're just doing this for the sake of the example here so that you can see it all on one screen. So now that we've gotten our file creation out of the way, let's go ahead, close our project navigator out. And what we're going to do is we are actually going to build a vertically scrolling list and a horizontally scrolling list. And we'll put our horizontally scrolling list over our vertically scrolling list, and we'll be able to drag things across from one list to the other. So let's go ahead and let's get that set up. Let's go ahead and create some variables. So we will create a variable called sections, and our sections will be a remember list of, and we will pass in a list of A, B, C, D, and E. Cool. And let's go ahead and do a similar thing for emojis. And that will again be a remember list of. And let's pass in a few emojis here. Cool. And actually, before we get too far gone, let's go ahead and let's also create another one, items per section. And this will be, again, another remember. And we'll say that this is 0 to 10. And we'll make that as a list. Cool. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and start building out our UI. So let's go ahead and build out a lazy column first. And in our lazy column, let's go ahead and add some modifiers here. So for the first one, let's go ahead and pass it some state. And so we will add that here. And so we will say that this is a val list state, and it is a remember lazy list state. Cool. So we'll store our list state there. And then let's pass in our modifiers. So we will say that the first one is fill max size. And then let's go ahead and give our list some content padding here. So in order to set this content correctly, let's go ahead and create some more variables at the top of our composable. So now I've gone ahead and pasted in the variables that we need. So feel free, if you're following along, to just pause the video and add these to your project as well. So as you can see here, we've got a lazy row content height. We've got our vertical padding. We've got a lazy row actual height. And we've got a floating offset that we are all using to figure out exactly what this list bottom padding needs to be. Now again, we're just doing that just for the sake of time and to help clean things up a little bit better. So now that we've got that set up, then in our content padding, we will add a padding value. And our padding value is going to be on the bottom, and it will be our list bottom padding that we've got set up right there. Cool. All right, and with that, we are ready to go ahead and start setting up the content inside the view itself. So let's go ahead and let's add our sections, and we will say our sections dot for each. And let's say that this is our section ID here. And then we will go ahead and iterate over each of those sections. A sticky header for this section, and this sticky header is going to take a text, and our text is going to be section, and then it is going to be our section ID here. Alright, and then let's go ahead and give it a modifier, and our modifier will be let's say instead of fill max size, let's say fill max width. Cool. And let's go ahead and break these out into their own lines. Let's go ahead and explicitly name that parameter there. Nice. Alright, and so it says our sticky header is angry, so let's check it out. And that's because that is experimental, so let's go ahead and add that to our view here. And let's go ahead and open up our preview and get that building so we can actually see what's going on here. And we didn't add our preview, so let's go ahead and do that next. So at the bottom of our file, we will say at preview. and we will say show background is equal to true. And then we will create our composable and function, and let's say that this is our advanced drag and drop preview. And then we will go ahead and give it our demo drag and drop theme, and then we will display our advanced drag and drop example. And it's asking for a modifier, so let's go ahead and give it a modifier, and let's just say padding of 16 dp. And then let's go ahead and clean up our section header just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and give it a style, and we will give it a material theme, and then we will use the typography, and let's say that we want a title, and let's do a medium-sized title there. And then let's go ahead and let's also add a little bit of padding so it's not up against the sides. So we will add some padding. And well, let's say that we want a horizontal padding, and we'll do 16 dp, and then we'll do a vertical of 8 dp. Let's see what that looks like. Cool, that looks a little bit better. Nice. Alright, and now that we've got our section headers set up and ready to go, let's go ahead and collapse those back out of the way, and we will start working on each individual item in each section. So for the items in each section, we will say that we want to pass in items, and we want this implementation here that takes a list of items, and we want the items per section in here. Cool. And then we'll open up our closure, and inside this we will give this a name of item number, and then we'll pass that into our closure here. Alright, and so in our items per section, let's go ahead and do the same thing. So we'll pass in a text, and we will say that this is row, and then we'll pass in our item number there. Cool, as you can see, it's already looking pretty decent. And then we can style this text here as well. So we will again use our material theme and our typography, and let's say that this is our body medium. That looks like it works well. Cool, and then let's give it some modifiers here. Forgot the comma, there we are. And our modifier will be to fill max width. And let's give this one some padding as well. So we will say that this takes some horizontal padding. We'll again say 16 dp. Nice. And let's give it a little bit more padding vertically. So let's give those padding of how about 12 dp for this one. Cool, that looks pretty good. And something else we may want to do too, just to be able to help distinguish a little bit better between the rows and the sections, is let's add another background modifier here to our title, and we will use our material theme, and let's say our color scheme, and we want our primary container. Cool, okay, so that helps us distinguish a little bit between the section headers and the rows themselves. Alright, so now let's close that back out of the way. And now that we've got the items set up, we have essentially a vertically scrolling list. So now let's go ahead and let's go through and add our horizontally scrolling list of emojis down at the bottom down here. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and wrap this lazy column with a box. And so let's take our lazy column here, and we will cut that and put it into our box. And then let's display a lazy row here. And inside of our lazy row, let's add some modifiers to this one as well. So our modifier will be our modifier, and we will say that we want to again fill the max width. Let's also align this and we will pass in our alignment of the bottom center. There we go. Cool. And then let's also pass in a padding variable here. And the padding will just be for the bottom, just to get it off of our safe area here. And so the bottom padding we will say is our floating offset, which again, we created up here. Cool. All right, and now let's go ahead and get this content displayed. So we will say that we will again display our items, and we want the one that takes a generic list of items. And the items that we want to display are our emojis. And so we will pass in each emoji into our Lambda function here. And so in here, we want to display a text. So we'll go ahead and display the text, and each text will be our emoji. Cool. So you can see the emojis are lined up down here. Now let's go ahead and set up some modifiers on our text. And our modifier will be dot size. And so for our size, we want to use the lazy row content height that we set up earlier. And then let's clip this to a circle shape. And let's give it a background. And we'll say that our background is color dot green. And we want the compose graphics color, and we should have made that capital green. There we go. Cool. And as you can see, our content is not exactly lined up where we want it to be. So in order to fix that, let's go ahead and let's wrap this in a box. And we will give our box the various modifiers that we want to have here. So let's take this and cut these from here. And we'll put that in our box. We'll shrink our text back down to one line there. And I put that in the wrong spot, so these need to go in here. And then we'll move our text into the lambda for this box. Nice. Okay, and then let's go ahead and set the content alignment for this one to alignment dot center. Now let's go ahead and make these emoji just a little bit larger. So let's say that we want to set the font size. Let's use 24 SP. That's a lot better. Very cool. And now, as you can see here, all of these emojis and circles are just right beside each other. So let's see if we can fix that. So on our lazy row up here, let's add a horizontal arrangement. And let's say that we want a space between arrangement here. And our space between, let's say we want 50 dp. Actually, let's not do space between. Let's do spaced by. And so we will say 50 dp. And then the alignment that we want to pass in is our alignment dot center horizontally. Cool. There we go. So now you can see we've got plenty of breathing room between each of these emoji icons down here on the bottom, and they're actually pushed off the screen, which you can see here, because if you remember, the robot was the last one on the screen, and now that one is pushed all the way off. All right, and with that, we've got our basic view set up and ready to go. So now let's go back over to our main activity, and instead of calling in our main activity, instead of calling our greeting, let's say that we want to call our advanced drag and drop example. And we will pass in the modifier dot padding, and we'll pass in that inner padding there. All right, and then we will rerun our app. Nice, and as you can see here, we have got a vertically scrolling list, and we have got our horizontally scrolling list on the bottom. Very cool. Now it looks like we could use a little bit more padding on these icons down here on the bottom, but so far that's a pretty decent start. So let's go ahead and jump back over to our example, and then we will go ahead and get our simulator out of the way here. So let's go ahead and let's make sure that our box is actually filling the max size here. So add our modifier dot fill max size to our outer box just to make sure everything is working well there. And then we will scroll down and let's add just a little bit more padding on our lazy row. Whoops, we got to go inside the comma with that one. So we will add a little bit more vertical padding, and that will be our lazy row vertical padding variable there. Cool. And don't forget to add that comma back. That's got our emoji row up off the bottom of the screen a little bit better. Cool. All right, and with that, we're able to go ahead and start adding the drag and drop functionality to our list items. So the first thing we want to go ahead and do is start with our source. So we will add a dot drag and drop source. And in our drag and drop source, we will go ahead and listen for our tap gesture. So we will listen for a tap gesture, and we will listen specifically for an on long press tap gesture. And when we get our long press, we will start our data transfer here. And so we will use our drag and drop data transfer, and we will pass that our clip data dot new plain text, and we can just give it any label for right now, and the value that we want to give this is our emoji. Cool, so that's got our source set up. So let's go ahead and scroll back up here to our column. So we want our target to be able to listen to all the various rows that we have here inside of our vertically scrolling list. So in order to do that, we are going to add the drag and drop target on the list items. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will say that we have our drag and drop target on each of the list items. So when this target starts, we want to use our should start drag and drop. And again, the same as we did earlier, we want to make sure that we check our event, and we want to make sure that our event mime type dot contains the clip description dot mime type of text plain. And again, we want to do that just to make sure that we are in fact receiving the type of data in our drag and drop that we are expecting to receive in our app. And then the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and set up our target. Now the target for this one is going to be just slightly different from the first one, because we actually want to remember a couple of keys. And so the keys that we want are going to be our section ID and our item number. Cool. And then inside of here, we will get our object that is our type of drag and drop target. And then again, we want to listen to our on drop event. All right, cool. And just like in our first example, we will say that we have a variable of our val dragged data, and that will be our event dot to Android drag event dot clip data dot get item at index 0, and we want the text for that. And then we will again print that content. So we will say that we dropped our dragged data on section, and then we'll display our section ID at row, and then we will display our item number there to display our item number. Cool. And then we will return true to let our on drop know that we have in fact handled this drop event. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and give this another run and check out where we're at as far as being able to drag and drop in the simulator. So let's also go ahead and open up Logcat, and let's clear it out from our previous example. And then let's go ahead and let's take this dragon and drop it on section B, row 1. So we can see that we dropped the dragon on section B at row 1. Very cool. Now let's see if we could drag the fire emoji here. And you could see we couldn't actually select it and scroll down. So I wonder if we could take this here and have it scroll up for us. Let's see. So it's not scrolling at all. So let's go ahead and let's see if we can fix that. So we'll stop our simulator for now, and we'll get Logcat back out of the way, and let's go ahead and work on having this automatically scroll whenever we're trying to drag list items up and down in our list. We're going to actually add a drag and drop target on the list itself. So in order to do that, that's going to be a little bit larger of a lift. So let's go ahead and let's create a new variable up here, and we will say that this is our list scroll drag target, and this is going to be a remember function, and this is again going to take an object, and it will be a drag and drop target, and we will also add our on drop event to this target as well. And now this is where the tutorial starts getting a fair bit more complicated. So the reason that we couldn't actually scroll on our list is because we needed to add not only an on drop event, we also need to add an on move event to our list. And so what that will do is that will have it listen for when we're scrolling up and down, and then it will also be listening for on drop events. But because we're scrolling up and down and dropping it on the list now becomes the one who is actually listening for the drops itself instead of the individual items like we had down here. And so in order to figure out which item we are dropping our emoji on, we're actually having to do a little bit of calculations to figure out which item in this list is visible on the screen, which item on the list happens to be under where we've dropped this content, and then do a little bit of calculation to figure out exactly which item that is that received that drop. So in order to continue on in our example, let's go ahead and let's add a couple more variables here. So I will go ahead and paste in these variables here, which we will use in just a second. But as you can see, we've added a new coroutine scope variable, and we've added a couple more things to help us do some calculations, which we'll need in just a second. And we've also added this scrolling job, because we actually need to be able to figure out when we're scrolling and when we're not, and when we need to cancel the various things. So let's go ahead and add that too. So now the first thing we want to do in our list is we want to use our scrolling job, and we want to actually cancel that job just to make sure that when we drop it, the list actually stops scrolling. So we will cancel our scrolling job like that. And then we will also, let's go ahead and return true, just to let the list know that we have handled our on drop. And then the next step that we want to do is we want to set our scrolling job back to null so that it is reset whenever our drop happens. And then let's create some more variables here to help us with our logic in the function. And so we will say that this is our Android drop event, and that is equal to our event dot to Android drag event. And we will also create a clip text, and that will be equal to our Android drop event dot clip data dot get item at, again, index 0. And then we are going to convert that to text, and we'll give it a context of null, and then we will change that to a string. Cool. All right, and so that will give us our clip text. And then the next thing we need is to know where in the x and y coordinates we dropped this. So we will say that we want our Android drop event dot x, and we want our drop y to be our Android drop event dot y. And then we're going to figure out where we are dropping this in our local coordinates. So we will call this our drop y local, and that will be equal to our drop y minus our lazy column y height in the window. And then we also want to make sure that we have clamped this value so that it doesn't fall out of range if we drop something. So we will call this clamp y, and it will be equal to our drop y local dot coerce in, and our minimum value will be 0, and our maximum value will be our lazy column height dot to float. Let's change that to clamped y just to make it a little more clear. And then I'm going to paste in a little bit more code here. So just to make sure that we are dropping this, in fact, on a visible item, even though we've tried to clamp it here, this is just in case. So we want to make sure that we've got our visible items. And if this thing happens to fall outside the bounds, we want to let our app know by saying, hey, we dropped this on something, but we're not sure what it was because it fell outside the bounds. And then if we do actually hit something and it does fall outside the bounds, then we want to make sure that we get the value of the thing that we hit. And if for some reason it does fall outside, we'll just take the last value of whatever thing is visible. And so whatever that item is that was where our drop was hit is going to be our target index. So our target index is our hit dot index. Cool. And then one last little bit of code to paste in is this. And so what this actually does is it stores our target index, and then we step through each individual section, and we say, did we drop the target? Like, was the target equal to the current one that we're on? Which means that we're on a particular header, so we're listening for drops on a header. Or was the target on an individual item? So if it was, then we say that we dropped our text on a particular section and row number. So for each of those indexes, we just add one after each loop to make sure that we are calculating everything just as we would expect. Now, even with all of that code, that is simply the code that we need to add in order to figure out when scrolling which item did we drop on, because this is something that is an event listener that is listening on the list itself, and then we're having to go in and calculate what item is under this particular list, because all we can see here is the list as a whole at this level since we're on this list here. But we need to figure out which specific item inside this list did we drop this particular emoji on. So that's what all of that code did. Now, for the next step, we actually need to make our list scroll. So let's go ahead and let's work on that next. So we've got our onMoved function here. And again, inside of our onMove, we've got a few more variables that we want to paste in. And so we can go over these really quickly. So again, we're just listening to our drag event. We are figuring out where we're at in the window, and we're figuring out where we are relative to the size of our list. And we're also setting up a top scroll zone and a bottom scroll zone. So what that actually does is whenever we get close to the top of our screen or close to the bottom of our screen, it will have the list automatically start to scroll. So before we do that automatic scrolling, let's go ahead and again, we want to cancel our scroll job just in case we happen to have, for any reason, some old scroll job still running in the background. We want to restart that and start with a fresh slate. So now that we've got our cancel set up, let's go ahead and start our new one. So if our relative y to our list is less than our top scroll zone and our relative y to list is greater than 0, then we want to go ahead and start scrolling up. So in order to start scrolling up, we set our scroll job equal to our coroutine scope dot launch. And when we launch that, we want to make sure that while this thing is true, that we are changing our list state to scroll by, and let's say -40, and we will set a delay on that of 50 milliseconds. That looks like it will work well. Cool. And so if we're basically close to the, so basically what this is saying is if we're close to the top of our list, we want to scroll up, and for each scroll, we want to delay that by 50 milliseconds. And if you want this to be faster scrolling, then you could increase this number or decrease your delay. Or if you want it to be a little bit slower, you could decrease this number or increase your delay. Either one, it's up to you. I found that this actually looks and works fairly well for what I want it to do. So that's for scrolling up. And if we want to scroll down, then we can check if our relative y to list is greater than our bottom scroll zone, and our relative y to list is less than our lazy column height. Then we want to set our scroll job to our coroutine scope dot launch, and we want to, again, while our job is running, to set the list state dot scroll by, and this time we want to do a positive 40 float to scroll down. And again, we'll use that same delay in milliseconds and set it to 50, and this will actually scroll our list down whenever we are close to the bottom of the screen. Cool. And now that we've got our on move out of the way, there are a couple other ones that we can do here. So we could say on ended, and we could say that we want to just make sure that we cancel our scroll job in case it is still running. Or if we want to do on exited, we could do the same thing as well. Just double check and make sure that we have canceled that scroll job. Cool. All right. And now that we have got this list scroll drag target actually set up, let's go ahead and use it. So we haven't started using this yet. We've just spent that time getting this set up. So now let's go ahead and use our list scroll drag target on our list. So we will scroll back down and we will add our dot drag and drop target, and we will listen to our should start, and again we'll pass in that event, and we will ensure that our event mime types contains our clip description text plain, and then for our target we will use our list scroll drag target that we had set up just a second ago. Cool. And there's one more thing to do now that we've added our drag and drop target, and that is we actually need to set some of the variables that we were using in our list scroll drag target code. And to do that, we are going to set our on globally positioned property here, and we will take the coordinates in this globally positioned variable here, and we will set our lazy column y in window to our coordinates dot positioned in window dot y. And then we will also set our lazy column height to our coordinates dot size dot height. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and give our app a run. And let's see if we can get our emojis to help the list scroll. So if we've got the dragon here, let's see if we can help it scroll down. Very cool. So let's drop it on section D, row 0. And let's open up Logcat. And we'll have to increase our screen here. So it dropped on section D, row 0. Very cool. And let's go ahead and let's see. Let's take the fire and let's make it scroll back up. Nice. And let's put it on section B, row 1. And let's move Logcat up again. Drop to the fire on section B, row 1. Very, very cool. Now, there is a little bit of a downside to the way we've got this set up. We basically are forcing the user to drop the emoji on a thing, even if they may have decided, actually, I didn't want to do that just yet. So let's go ahead, and now that we've got our list scrolling, let's go ahead and add a way for the user to cancel their drag and drop process. So we will do that by, we'll stop our app first, and then we'll do that by adding another section here, and we will add it between our column and our row. And this section will be a column, and inside our column we want an icon, and we'll pass in an image vector. And so our image vector will be an icons.default, and let's use the close icon there. Cool. And we will give it a content description of null. And then let's pass in a text, and let's give it a text of cancel. Nice. And then we'll also pass some modifiers into our column as well. So let's go ahead and say that we have a modifier equal to our modifier. And let's go ahead and give it a background, and we'll say that our background is a color dot red. Cool. And let's clip it to a circle shape as well. And then we can also align this to the bottom center, just like that. Cool. And then let's add a little padding, and let's give it 16 dp for example. And let's also, because you can see our content over here, let's also add a horizontal alignment, and let's center it horizontally. Cool. So let's also change the tint of our icon, and let's set it to color.white. And let's change the color of our text and do the same thing. So we will say that this is our color.white as well. And then we don't want our cancel button to be displaying at all times. So let's go ahead and scroll back up to the top of our advanced drag and drop example composable here, and let's add another small piece of state. So we will say that we have our val is dragging, and let's set it equal to a remember mutable state of, and we'll use false for example. So while we're here, let's also go ahead and add one more state variable here, and this will be our bounds for our cancel button. So this will actually make sure that whenever we drop the emoji inside this button, that it'll cancel our drag and drop experience. So let's go ahead and let's conditionally draw our cancel box here. So we will scroll back down, and we will wrap this with a if check for is dragging. So if we are dragging, that's when we want to display our column. And we use the wrong remember state variable here. So let's scroll back up, and this is not equals, remember, it is by, remember? Cool. So we are using our isDragging to conditionally show and hide our cancel button, but it isn't actually ever being set. So let's go ahead and let's do that next. So we start our drag from our source. So inside of our long press, we will set isDragging to true. And it looks like we forgot something on our isDragging variable. Yes, that in fact did need to be a variable, not a constant. So now that we've got our isDragging set to true here, let's go ahead and set it to false whenever we are done dragging our items. So there's a couple different places where we can do that. So if, for example, we aren't scrolling, then we can go ahead and we can set isDragging to false here. And this will cancel that drag event whenever we dropped if we're not scrolling. And then if we are scrolling, then that's when we use our list scroll drag target up top. So whenever we are ready to cancel that here, then we can also say that isDragging is set to false here as well. Cool. All right, so let's give our app a run and let's see if our cancel button pops up whenever we run our app and we start dragging. So let's go ahead and move the dragon. Nice, and as you can see, our cancel button pops up, but it isn't actually hiding any of our other icons, so our other icons in this horizontally scrolling list are in the way of our cancel button. So let's go ahead and fix that next. So let's collapse that back down. And then we will scroll back down on our list and we will come down to our lazy row. Nice. And one thing that we can do is we could add an alpha property here. So our alpha property, we will check if it is dragging. And if it is dragging, then we want to return 0, else we want to return 1. Cool. So now let's rerun our app again. Nice. So if we move our dragon now, very cool, we can see that our cancel button is very clearly displayed, which is nice. And there's no other icons in our way at that point. So let's go ahead and close out that app. Now we're not actually doing anything in our code to deal with canceling it yet. So let's go ahead and let's work on that next. So in our column, we set up a property earlier, which was again that on global positioned. So let's go ahead and do that again. And in our on global positioned, we will take our coordinates, and our coordinates, in our coordinates, we'll set our cancel bounds to our coordinates dot bounds in the window. Cool. So what this will actually do is this will set our cancel bounds up every time that our cancel button is displayed. So then now that we've got our bounds set up, we actually need to deal with what happens when someone drops something on that cancel bound. So let's, for example, start here in our list items where we are dealing with dragging and dropping when we don't scroll anything. So let's go ahead and paste some code in here. And let's go over the code so we can just save a little bit of time. So we've got our drag event here, same as we did up top in our more advanced function. And we are again getting just the X and the Y from our drop event. And so now that we've got the location for our X and Y for wherever we have dropped this item, we want to check our cancel bounds and see if the item that we dropped falls within those bounds. And if it is, then we're just going to print out that the user canceled their drop. We are going to set isDragging back to false so that we can show our horizontally scrolling lazy row here. And then we're going to return true so that we can tell our function that we did in fact handle this event. Now we can also go ahead and copy this same block of code here, and we can scroll back up to our on drop event for our list scroll drag target, and we can do the same thing here. So we can, right below our drop X and our drop Y, We can again just paste the exact same block of code here. And again, this is just checking that if our drop event happens to be within the bounds of our cancel button, then we're going to print out that the user canceled the drop. So let's go ahead and give our code a run, and let's check it in the simulator and see what it looks like. So let's also go ahead and open up logcat, and we will clear out our previous logs here. So again, we'll just, for example, choose the dragon, and let's drop it on section B, row 4. Cool, and we can see that it was in fact dropped on section B, row 4. And if we take the fire emoji and we actually drop it on our cancel button, we can see that the user canceled the drop. Very cool. So now we're actually dealing with not only dragging and dropping something on a list that doesn't scroll, we're dragging and dropping something on a list that can scroll both up and down, and giving the user the ability to cancel that drag and drop process, which is a really, really cool thing. Now, let's go ahead and get our logcat out of the way now that we know everything is working like we expect. And let's go ahead and look at this at full scale just so you can see it. So for example, we can take the robot and we can scroll down, and we can scroll him up. We can drop him on a particular item, or we could take the rocket, for example, do the same thing, scroll up and down, or we could just straight cancel our drop. And with that, we've been able to go over drag and drop in Jetpack Compose. Now, if you got value from this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you leave a comment, just be nice about it. That's all I ask. Thanks. Have a great day.